Good Saturday, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for November the 5th. Today we are reading together the last of Job's words that are going to be concluded here in Job chapter 31. It is the last of Job's closing arguments concerning the ordeal that he has been experiencing while having dealt with such tragedy in his life. He was in mourning back in chapter 3, and he spoke from the heart concerning his feelings at this time, and then his friends began to chastise him and rebuke him because in their minds he was simply suffering the fate that he deserved for some obvious sins that he committed. I mean, nobody would suffer as Job was suffering if they were not guilty of sin. And that is just the natural, logical conclusion that they were coming to, given their I think very obvious worldview, as was expressed throughout the three cycles of discourse that we noticed from chapter 4 that ends here in chapter 31. So Job here is concluding these last three chapters of his closing argument. The first chapter in chapter 29 focused on the life that he was living, the righteous life, or how in his mind at least, he was living righteously and he was being blessed for his righteous way of living. And he talked about the good that he experienced, how he was a blessing to many people because he sought to be righteous before God. Well, now here in chapter 30, or in our last chapter 30, we saw that something changed and he no longer was experiencing the blessing of God, but he seemed to be somebody who was enduring a great deal of punishment from God. He was being mocked and chastised by even the foolish young men, as are described within that chapter. He finishes in chapter 30, verses 20 through 31, speaking about what he perceives to be injustice that he was experiencing at the hand of God. You know, he's saying, nothing changed me. I was still the exact same type of person, yet all these bad things started happening to me. That seems unjust, God. That's what it seems like to him. But here in the chapter 31, he's going to lay out this argument. Well, listen, if I had done these things, he's going to list a number of sins that he could have committed. If I had done these things, then it would be just for me to suffer in this manner. I think the case that Job is trying to lay out is I haven't done these things, so it doesn't make sense to me why I'm being punished in this way. And eventually, at the end of chapter 31, he's at his wit's end, and he's going to scream out, if only I had someone to hear my case. If only I had someone to hear my case. And it's almost a demand that God listen to him and answer his questions and give him the opportunity to defend his causes. Let's read together here in Job chapter 31, beginning in verse number 1. I have made a covenant with my eyes. How then could I look at a young woman? For what portion would I have from God above? Or what inheritance from the Almighty on high? Doesn't disaster come to the unjust and misfortune to the evildoers? Does he not see my ways and number all my steps? Have I walked in falsehood, or my foot has rushed to deceit, or my foot has rushed to deceit? Let God weigh me on accurate scales, and he will recognize my integrity. If my step has turned from the way, my heart has followed my eyes, or impurity has stained my hands, let someone else eat what I have sown, and let my crops be uprooted. If my heart has gone astray over a woman, or I have lurked in my neighbor's door, let my own wife grind grain for another man, and let another man sleep with her. For that would be a disgrace. It would be an iniquity deserving punishment. For it is a fire that consumes down to Abaddon. It would destroy my entire harvest. If I have dismissed the case of my male or female servants when they made a complaint against me, what could I do when God stands up to judge? How should I answer him when he calls me to account? Did not the one who made me in the womb also make them? Did not the same God form us both in the womb? If I have refused the wishes of the poor, or let widows' eyes go blind, if I have eaten my few crumbs alone, without letting the fatherless eat any of it, For from my youth I raised him as a father, and since the day I was born I guided the widow. If I have seen anyone dying for lack of clothing, or a needy person, verse 19, without a cloak, if he did not bless me while warming himself with a fleece from my sheep, if I ever cast my vote against the fatherless child when I saw that he had support in the city gate, then let my shoulder blade fall from my back and my arm be pulled from its socket. For disaster from God terrifies me, and because of his majesty I could not do these things. If I place my confidence in gold, or called fine gold my trust, if I have rejoiced because my wealth is great, or because my own hand has acquired so much, if I have gazed at the sun when it was shining, or at the moon moving in splendor, so that my heart was secretly enticed, and I threw them a kiss, this would also be an iniquity deserving punishment, for I would have denied God above. If I have rejoiced over my enemy's distress, or become excited when the trouble came his way, I have not allowed my mouth to sin by asking for his life with a curse, having the members of his household said, who is there who has not had enough to eat at Job's table? No stranger had to spend the night on the street, for I opened my door to the traveler. Have I covered my transgressions as others do, by hiding my iniquity in my heart? Because I greatly feared the crowds, because the contempt of clans terrified me, so I grew silent and would not go outside. If only I had someone to answer my case, I had someone to hear my case. Here is my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my opponent compose his indictment. I would surely carry it on my shoulder and wear it like a crown. I would give him an account of all my steps, and I would approach him like a prince. If my land cries out against me, and its furrows join in weeping, if I have consumed its produce without payment, or shown contempt for its tenants, then let thorns grow instead of wheat, and stinkweed instead of barley. The words of Job then are concluded. Job chapter 31. As we look throughout this text, by my count at least, I see 14 ifs that are mentioned. We'll say 13 follow the same type of pattern. And the pattern is this: if I have done something wrong, then there is a punishment that I deserve. Job begins in this text by speaking of the covenant that he has made with his eyes, that he would not look at a young woman, saying that he would not lust after a young woman. This was serious business to Job. The fact that he says, I have made a covenant, is a strong statement of understanding this to be very serious business. So much so that if that I have done this, and the reason he has done this, because what portion would I have, verse number 2, from God above, or what inheritance from the Almighty on high? And I think what is implied here, if I had lusted, I would have nothing from God. In fact, doesn't disaster come to the unjust and misfortune to the evildoer? Does he not see my ways and number my steps? With these things being true, Job says, I made this covenant to be a righteous and godly person. But let's just say, if I walked in falsehood, if my foot had rushed to deceit, then you know what? Let God weigh me on accurate scales. Let him do that. But if he does, he will recognize my integrity. He will recognize my integrity, that these are not things I've done. If my step has turned from the way, if my heart has followed my eyes, if impurity has stained my hands, then you know what? Let someone else eat what I have sown, and let my cross be under it. That's what I deserve. If my heart has gone astray over a woman, or if I have lurked at my neighbor's door, then you know what? Let another man grind, or let my own wife grind grain for another man, and let another man sleep with her. That's what I deserve. If I've done that, then this would be the correct recompense. And he goes through to talk about a number of other things, a number of other relationships that he has with servants and such, hearing their cases, caring for them, showing them kindness, refusing the wishes of the poor, letting the widow's eyes go blind, eating his few crumbs alone, letting anyone die from a lack of clothing, not giving a needy person a cloak, casting my vote against the fatherless child. If all these things happen, verse 22, if these things have happened, then let my shoulder blade fall from my back and my arm be pulled from its socket. If I have not raised my hands to do what is right in these situations, then I have no need for hands. Let them be taken from me. Job just, again, I believe he's speaking to all these specific things because these are all things that he has done. I have been righteous in this regard. I have not failed in these ways. And if I had, then I deserve punishment, but I haven't. Therefore, he really demands almost, and this would, at least in my estimation, this would be where Job really pushes the envelope here. This is really where he presses against the edge of stepping over a line, because he demands something from God. If only I had someone to hear my case. Here's my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. Let the Almighty answer me. Almost demanding, God, hear me. You're causing all this against me. I deserve to know why. I deserve to have a hearing. I deserve to have my case heard. Job here, I think, is just, after everything that he's gone through, not just with the loss that he suffered, both in his family, with his possessions, with his own bodily comfort, but also having to do the runaround with these three men, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, who, for the first and only time, I think, at least, I think it's the first time, yes, yeah, right here, I think in the next chapter 32, verse number 1, they're actually called three friends. I don't think they're called that any other time except this. But after the runaround with them, I think he's at his end, and this is his last statement, his last hurrah. He's just going to let it all out. He's going to let it all hang out and say his piece and really speak from his heart. And again, far be it from me to sit here and cast stones at Job, considering what he has gone through and considering the wrestling that he was dealing with. Again, it's such a mixed bag from Job within these chapters, because there are many times in which he says things and we're like, I don't know if I'd say that, but then he follows up very quickly with a statement of faith and trust in God. Here he's demanding a hearing from God, and yet at the same time he's saying, if I'm guilty of these things, then sure, that's fine, I deserve them, but his confidence is the fact that he hasn't lived in this way. So this is Job's conclusion. Again, verse 35 to me: if only I had someone to hear my case. Here is my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my opponent compose his indictment. Listen to me, God. Hear my case. I like the note here. It says Job felt so confident that his integrity would be vindicated that he assigned this affidavit. He signed this affidavit to demand that hearing before God. Now, of course, the next voice that we're going to hear, we're going to read in the story, is not God's. It's actually Elihu. We're going to talk a little bit about him. He's going to speak, I believe, for four chapters, I believe it is. Oh, nope, more than that. Let's see here. He speaks for 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 6 chapters. He's got 6 chapters of writing here, which something interesting about that I read is that Elihu's speech here is longer than 12 other Old Testament books and 17 of the 27 New Testament writings. That's kind of crazy. But we'll get that. We'll get to that in the morning on Sunday the 6th. As we consider Job's last speech here, I want to just recognize that he is in no way denying justice. Job here is recognizing, if I had done these things, I deserve this type of punishment. But his confidence is in his integrity, And in fact, again, we know that his integrity was intact. We know that based on what we were able to read in chapters 1 and 2. So Job is not denying justice. He's not trying to make excuses. He's not trying to escape something he deserves. He's in fact saying, if I did do these things, I would deserve this type of punishment. But that's not what has happened. I don't have anyone else to turn to except God. I want God to hear my case. And eventually, come chapter 38, God is going to speak. But before we get there, we have to read what Elihu says in chapters 32 through 37. We'll get to reading that tomorrow. Thanks so much for tuning in to this reading today. Looking forward to seeing everybody tomorrow for our Lord's Day assembly and our Bible classes. Remember tonight to fall back an hour, which I guess that means we get an extra hour sleep tonight, right? I think that's right. Because spring forward, I mean, we lose an hour. So tonight we gain an hour. That's kind of cool. I'm excited about that. I would rather our clocks just stay how they are right now instead of doing all the switching back and forth. But I don't know, maybe the government would be kind of useful for us in the future. Maybe they'll change that at some point. But be that as it may, we look forward to seeing everyone tonight. Make sure you set your clocks back, and we'll get at it tomorrow for our Bible classes at 10 a.m. and our assembly at 11, where I'm going to talk about overcoming the fear of failing. Looking at the story of Jesus walking on the water and calling Peter to meet him out there as well. Really excited for that study, and I hope it'd be very good, encouraging to us all. Continue to be praying for everyone who has been sick recently. Hopefully we'll have a good number of folks back tomorrow. Look forward to seeing you then. Take care, and God bless.